Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square, and joining me today is the Center Square's correspondent from Wisconsin, Benjamin Yount. Let's talk budgets, Ben, because you've been writing a lot on the Wisconsin budget, and there's been a couple of shockers.
Wisconsin needs a new budget by the 1st of July. That's the constitutional deadline. And so we knew this week the governor would sign the budget. And at the end of last week, before we let off for the holidays, Tony Evers was talking about issuing as many partial vetoes as he can. And Wisconsin's governor is unique in that he or she, we haven't had a she yet, but the governor is cloaked in immense line item veto powers. They can scratch things out, cut lines out. I want this. I don't want that. Many times, many states, it's a take it or leave it. Wisconsin, there is much more of an opportunity for the governor to craft a budget after it has been voted on. And you got to remember, we have a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. So the things that the governor wanted mainly weren't included in this budget. Now, the governor cannot spend money that he doesn't have. He cannot create new laws, but he can change the way the budget is written to redirect money, and he can, of course, cut things out. So we knew that the governor was going to take his veto pen, maybe an X-Acto knife, and do some work on the budget. What he did absolutely shocked people, and it came down to two major shockers, to use the term. He eliminated 99% of the $3.5 billion, $4.4 billion when you count property taxes, the $1 billion tax cut that Republican lawmakers included in this budget. The governor also, for the first time ever, eliminated some dots and dashes and numbers, combined a sentence to create a 400-year education funding increase, something that the top Republican in the Wisconsin Assembly said no one ever thought would be possible. It has never happened in the state. And when the governor finally did this, it left jaws agape across the state.
What does this mean, the 400-year tax or education fund? I mean, because when you talk education funding, you're talking about taxes.
You're not wrong in saying that this is a tax increase, because you can't just say, well, we're going to give you more money. Schools get money from taxpayers, either from the state or from their local taxpayers. So this is a 400-year tax increase. And Robin Vos, the Assembly Speaker, was on a Milwaukee radio station earlier today, this Thursday that we are taping this, and he explained what happened. And again, you have to remember that Wisconsin's governors have an incredibly powerful veto pen. Here's how Robin Vos explained it.
We passed a constitutional amendment several years ago getting rid of what was called the Vanna White veto, where a governor had the ability to slash out individual letters, forming new words. So that is currently the law in Wisconsin, that you can't form new words. But what he decided to do was, in the legislation, it says there's going to be an increase in the 23-24 and 24-25 school years of $325 per pupil. That's the agreement that we made with the governor. He used his creative veto to eliminate the dashes. So it made it a lot longer than 23-24. It made it 23-45. That's not something that's never been done in Wisconsin before. It clearly wasn't the intent of anyone in the legislature to have a property tax increase for 400 years. And that's why perhaps someone will sue. And maybe if we have a fair Supreme Court, they would follow the precedent that has been established for decades to say a governor doesn't have that power. But only time will tell.
So you have the old Vanna White veto of scratching out this letter and changing the meaning of a word. Now there's a new Vanna White veto where you scratch out numbers. And this is something that, again, when Republicans try to write the budget, they try and craft it in a way with an eye towards avoiding that. No one ever expected that the governor would do this for 400 years. By the way, the price tag, according to Will Flanders over at WIL, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, $57 billion. That's what the governor's $325 per student per year into perpetuity school funding order will put taxpayers on the hook for $57 billion. Don't forget, this is a $99 billion spending plan. And last week, that was the narrative. Last week, the narrative was you had a couple of Republicans who said, look, this spends way too much. You had a number of conservatives and budget watching groups in Wisconsin who pointed out, look, we're hoping for some tax relief off of a $7 billion surplus, but this is a budget that spends $10 billion more. It spends more money at the local level. It spends more money at the state level. It spends more money at the University of Wisconsin. It spends more money for every single person who draws a state paycheck. They're getting a raise in this budget. And we go from the focus on the spending to this focus on this spending. And only in Wisconsin, conservatives are saying on Twitter today, only in Wisconsin can Tony Evers make a $99 billion 2-year state budget look small by comparison.
Did the governor have any comments to make after making the grand switcheroo in the budget?
He said he was improving the state budget. That his line throughout was the legislature didn't fund the priorities that he laid out. And so he was going to either redirect money or he was going to change the budget. He invited Republicans to come back to the Capitol and continue to work on the budget. But Vos was very clear. This is not something that Republicans are going to do. They are not going to raise taxes, not in the least. And so we now have a little bit of a detente and a stalemate. The problem here is that state capitals are buildings of marble and stone and iron and steel, but it really is, a Capitol building really is a building where your word has to matter. And Vos, again, earlier today said the governor broke his word.
He ran for office promising and obviously taking credit for the tax cut that we passed, which focused on the exact same tax rate that he is now criticizing and vetoing the tax cut for. So he's really just a hypocrite. He clearly could have signed the tax cut for the broad middle bracket and maybe not signed the one for the upper income bracket, which I still think we should do. But he could have done that and at least kept his promise. But instead, he's just breaking his word and returning to form. It says to me that Tony Evers is clearly not going to run for re-election, because how can you make a promise in one campaign and then spend the next 4 years breaking it time and time again? He's just not truthful.
What is your take on the final statement that Evers is basically not going to run for re-election?
Wisconsin voters tend to tire of governors of both parties. Tommy Thompson was the last to be elected 3 times, and I think he got elected 4th, but he quickly left to the Bush administration, if memory serves me correct. But, Scott Walker ran for a 3rd term and there was a bit of a fatigue. Jim Doyle, there was fatigue. The Wisconsin voters are not finicky. We don't usually change governors midstream, but at a certain point, 8 years is enough. And Tony Evers, I've made this point several times, that if you looked at what Tony Evers ran for re-election on, outside of abortion, he got every single thing he wanted in this first year of his 2nd term. Now, we'll probably be talking about abortion later because Janet Protasewicz will join the court in the Wisconsin Supreme Court next month. That will give it a liberal majority. That then opens the door to changing the rules for abortion here in Wisconsin, giving Tony Evers everything that he wants. There is a lot of speculation that he will not run again. That also opens up this great, who is next horse race. But that's a story for September once we get through with all of this. It is going to be interesting to see how this education funding veto works, whether it will be allowed. There was a case back in 2020 where you had a conservative majority Wisconsin Supreme Court say that the governor cannot create a law that is not out of the intent of the legislature, that you can sort of finagle the numbers and X out this and rewrite that, but you cannot create from whole cloth a new law. The hook there is a new law. Vos said it was never the intent of the legislature to increase school funding for 400 years. It was the intent to increase school funding. So a lot of lawyers are going to get paid a lot of money to take a look and see exactly where that line is.
Okay, well, do you have anything else to add to this?
Well, there's so many other things that the budget vetoes included. Diversity, equity, and inclusion over at the University of Wisconsin. The governor slashed 90% of the tourism money that Milwaukee was asking for the Republican National Convention, while allowing the Green Bay Packers to keep all of their $2 million for the NFL draft. Robin Vos said there is a provision tucked into the back of this budget by another one of the governor's vetoes that will have Medicaid pay for gender-affirming care or trans surgeries here in Wisconsin. Again, something that Vos's adamant lawmakers never intended to do. So they're going to be, for the next couple of days, a few more of these, oh, wait, and we found this in the budget too kind of stories. But that's, again, why we play the games and why the Center Square exists.
Well, listeners may keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.